Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us here today. We have a webinar here to provide an update to the ASX announcement by Andromeda Metals on Friday, and the market update today presented by Andromeda's Managing Director, James Marsh. Following James' update, I'll be conducting a Q&A session with questions that have been sent through from shareholders. If you have a question that is not addressed by James either in the update or during the Q&A session today, then please send it through by email to ir@andromet.com.au. I'll now invite James to speak. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Peter. Hello, everyone, and good morning. My name's James Marsh. I'm the Managing Director for Andromeda. As a near-term producer of the kaolin industrial mineral, I wanted to provide shareholders with an update of how we continue progressing our flagship Great White Kaolin project and all the other activities that seek to leverage the potential of this world-class resource. Developing the project represents a significant long-term opportunity for Andromeda. This is a multi-generational opportunity, and you, our shareholders, also for the Eyre Peninsula community and for the South Australian economy. Since identifying the global significant and high-quality halloysite kaolin deposit, the company has continued to execute on its strategy of progressing development. We've been doing this through expanding our knowledge, understanding of the resource itself, identifying markets and customer opportunities for selling products, by developing customer relationships that lead to binding offtake agreements, researching and assessing the market for new high-value products and applications, gaining the relevant approvals to develop and undertake mining operations, and also undertaking preparatory works in advance of anticipated approvals being granted. At every stage of the process, Andromeda's board and management have sought to methodically and progressively de-risk the project's development, whilst also evaluating different funding arrangements that best suit the long-term interests of the company and its shareholders. In executing our strategy of progressively de-risking a project, the company has achieved a number of significant milestones since we raised capital during 2021. These milestones include having gained approval of the mining lease and miscellaneous purpose leases for all the relevant land underpinning the Great White deposit. That was December 2021. We completed our definitive feasibility study, or DFS I'll refer to, and providing an updated ore reserve of 15.1 million tonnes in April 2022. We added to our global number of committed sales with a further 2 binding offtake agreements. That was in July and August of this year. We signed the land acquisition agreements for the relevant land, all the land required, which underpin the project, and that was only announced earlier this month. We launched a program for environmental protection and rehabilitation, otherwise known as a PEPR. That was also done during August. And then we triggered the procurement process for long lead items. That was announced only last Friday. And finally, we continue preparatory activities in advance of our PEPR approval. So just want to make it very clear here that the intention of Andromeda's board and management is to deliver the project as outlined in the DFS. Since publishing the DFS, and in light of the changed conditions though, through the impacts of COVID and other geopolitical developments, the board has sought to further de-risk this project. Now, marketing activities are a critical function of any industrial minerals project, and especially a kaolin project, and access to some key target markets that we are looking at, such as China and Japan, to name but a few, remain very restrictive. In addition to that, the risk environment of the world has been elevated compared to when the DFS was completed. The changed geopolitical economic environment has resulted in labour shortages, supply chain disruptions, rises in the rate of inflation, cost and capital. So in view of all that, accordingly, a refinement of the staged scalable approach to developing the Great White Kaolin project was deemed more prudent to match the offtakes more closely with and reduced capital intensity. So whilst demand remains solid for the products, the timeframes for completing negotiations with customers have been extended, which in ordinary times are actually already very lengthy due to the exacting process and product specifications and extensive sampling and testing requirements. So whilst China remains the largest market for us, interesting to note that the rest of Asia is actually a greater share of the global demand for our products. So the company sought to increase geographic diversity of its discussion with customers, and therefore leading to offtake agreements. So shareholders would have noticed that recent offtakes were for customers covering alternative markets to China, which include Japan, Vietnam, Hong Kong, Malaysia, and others. In addition to ongoing negotiations for these binding offtake agreements with several parties, and in anticipation of the approval of our PEPA, the company has progressed the design, development, and planning for commencement of mining activities. This will provide the ability to ramp up production volumes to match the offtake profile, with a goal of achieving the levels and timeframes clearly outlined in the DFS for the Great White Kaolin project, which was released in April. But very importantly, it's whilst also minimizing risk and early stage capital intensity. So this staged scalable approach has resulted in optimizing the planning for mining operations and the supporting facilities through the building of what we called a starter plant. The design of which and planning for which is now complete. And it, very importantly also, it incorporates the ability to quickly ramp up processing capacity in line with additional commitments in customer demand. So the starter plant represents the beginning of a staged approach to getting and developing to the Great White Kaolin project that will deliver on the production and the financial outcomes of the DFS. The staged approach is really to de-risk the development of the project whilst building the Great White brand, reputation, and value in the market. After revising and rescheduling the mine plan and redesigning the mine closure plan, our updated environmental modeling showed that the starter plant was able to reduce the initial capital required. It will get us into production without compromising the overall designs and details that we published in the DFS. So when fully operational, the starter plant is planned to process at a nominal rate of 100,000 tons a year of feed ore, with a nameplate capacity of approximately 50,000 tons a year of final product to fulfill customer demand. The plant is designed to produce our products KCM 90 and also Great White HRM, but it has built-in scalability and optionality to provide the feedstock to meet the need for other products and customers' demands. The ramp up in production for the initial 100,000 tons a year of feed ore is expected to increase in line with offtakes in the processing capacity of 300,000 tons a year, which was outlined in stage 1 of DFS. Now, securing good quality binding offtake agreements for kaolin projects is a lengthy and complicated process. This has been made far more difficult without face-to-face meetings possible, and also with technical centers throughout Asia being closed for lengthy periods and even 1 to 2 years during lockdowns. The customer approval process also requires laboratory, pilot scale, full scale commercial trials, and then followed by downstream customer approvals. And that's all before negotiation of the offtakes can actually start. So completion of the approvals also requires large amounts of high quality representative product, along with intimate customer product and process requirements and knowledge of those. Now, Andromeda spent considerable time and effort on these activities, and over the last 4 years, we've been doing that around the world, and that includes 4 full-scale plant trials in 4 countries. And the offtake agreements themselves can be very complex things to negotiate. They're usually well over 30 pages of clauses, and they have to be translated and translated again and reviewed by multiple parties, including lawyers legal representatives on both sides. So very challenging, but despite that, we have 4 binding offtakes in place and a number of others under negotiation. So until we achieve the critical milestones that I've just detailed, the board considered that ordering of long lead items would be premature and would expose shareholders to unacceptable risk. But as these milestones have now been achieved, the board has determined that it's appropriate time to order these long lead items, which was announced last Friday. The procurement process for long lead items is anticipated to take approximately 6 to 12 months, depending on which items we're talking about, and includes finalizing tender documents, placing orders with selected manufacturers, and delivery to site. So during this time, on-site preparatory works will be undertaken in advance of expected arrival of the long lead items. So once the approval of the PEPR is received, there are numerous activities that will run in parallel to complete the construction as efficiently as possible. Important to emphasize they're running in parallel. So significant plant components will be fabricated off-site in advance to reduce construction times. And once those components, long lead items arrive, they can be swung into place. So pending approval of the PEPR, commissioning of the starter plant is expected sometime late 2023. That's commissioning phase. So that concludes my formal update. I'll now turn back to Peter. And Peter, please, can you ask any questions that we've got from shareholders?
Thanks, James. Yes, there are many questions that have come through, and we hopefully will have answered some of them during your preamble, and we'll summarise some of them in these questions. As I said, please feel free to send your individual questions through to ir@andromet.com.au. So the first question that we have here, James, is that some shareholders feel Friday's announcement meant you were no longer committed to the DFS, that it indicated a delay in the stated timeline for the first of the 4 phases of production. Can you give them confidence around the DFS timing and volumes detailed in the DFS?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Yeah, I can confirm that I've had hundreds of messages since Friday. I apologise, I can't answer people's messages independently. I literally have hundreds coming through every day. But the aim of this is to address your questions now. And thanks for that question, Peter, which gives me a chance to cover some more aspects of that. And as stated in the preamble, the procurement process does run concurrently with many other ongoing activities, which are all part of the project development. So the key to this was we needed the PEPR submission to trigger plant procurement and all the other activities go along with that. That will give us the chance for most efficient delivery of development milestones. There are many moving parts and priorities to consider in this. We have civil works, site works, project staff, road, transport solutions, and lots of other matters, all of which are being progressed alongside with this procurement process. So the company still does intend to deliver on the DFS. So I can't stress that enough. We are still aimed, and our goal is to deliver exactly on that DFS. The starter plant represents an initial start to the mining operations, and it gives us the ability to ramp up production, matching the profile of our offtakes. But as I said before, it also does that whilst minimizing the risk and upfront capital intensity of the project. The board feels that this is really the most prudent approach, and it should be considered as a refinement of the DFS. So what we're doing is refining the DFS rather than any substantial departure from it. So what we've done is we've effectively reduced the upfront capital requirements by optimizing the initial volume through the starter plant so that aligns with our customer needs and it grows with our customer needs. The offtakes that are coming through, they double year on year. So there's a very significant growth there, and we want the plant to match that growth. So whilst the initial capital product volume output has been reduced, we still intend to deliver on those final volumes that you saw in the DFS, and that will remain to be our goal. Thanks, Peter.
Okay, thanks, James. Next question is on whether you can give an update on the expected timing for the approval of the pepper.
Yeah, so the pepper process, this is a very complex process. In the end, we were estimating about 6 months. It took us 7.5 months to complete. But the reasons for that were revision to the project size, ramp up, and ultimately we managed to save ourselves around about $3 million, in fact, well over $3 million by doing that. We've had to sign over the environmental bond, which is that very large amount. We managed to restructure that, so we saved that money. So we demonstrated as a priority to apply funds as efficiently as possible here. And it's important to note that the development time for our pepper was far better than most prior submissions of peppers for the South Australian government. As for the approval process, that matter is outside of our control. That is now up to the South Australian Department for Energy and Mining, but we do continue to have a very good working relationship with that department. And we plan to start ground engaging activities as soon as that approval is received, and we are preparing for that to happen.
Thank you, James. Now, this question is a pretty frequent one. Can you provide an update on the carbon capture plant?
Yeah, you're right, Peter. That's a very topical subject, and it's also one that is very exciting for us all in Andromeda. But as we've previously disclosed, the carbon capture plant has arrived in Australia, and it is located in Newcastle at the moment. And the status is it's just awaiting certification of its components and assembly. Once it's been assembled, then will be some more testing required and certification. And we really look forward to be able to update the market on the progress of that. And we will do that as soon as we possibly can.
All right, now some of the big ticket items. There have been 2 successful binding offtake agreements signed and reported recently, which help to underpin the project. What can you tell us about the LOI with IMCD for a concrete additive, where that lies, and other potential product areas previously flagged, such as the interest for cosmetics additive?
Yes, well, this is another topical area because this is where we have some new high value products coming through and coming on stream. So I can say that negotiations are continuing to convert that letter of intent with IMCD, who are a leading global additives distributor, and we are converting that into a binding offtake at the moment. But as outlined earlier, negotiations on these agreements take longer than expected. They're very complex, and we want to get them right. We want to remain confident that we have very high grade kaolin, and we have some very unique products here and halloysite products. And these are well matched for global markets. And we'll complete those as quickly as possible. And we'll make sure that they are high quality ones that we can rely on for a very long time, because we're not talking about 1 year, 2 years, even 3 years here. We're talking about people want these products for decades. So we also continue investigating opportunities to supply products for use in other areas. So you mentioned cosmetics. We have opportunities also in pharmaceuticals. The concrete additive, we have variants of that now, which have been approved for technical approval and use as a suspension aid, for example, and in drilling fluids. So that's all going very well, and we're expanding those high value applications all the time. Andromeda does, though, remain very aware of its continuous disclosure commitments. So that means we will continue to update the market in a timely manner. And once there is any development requiring announcement, we will make sure that comes out.
Thanks, James. Perhaps just on that question, a little bit more about IMCD, their scale, their reach. Yeah,
so they're the biggest in the world of their type for distribution of additives across a whole range of different applications. Very importantly, they are specialized in construction, coatings, and associated areas where kaolin and halloysite kaolin have a lot of potential. So they have a very good track record here. They are a multi-billion-dollar business, and they are focused initially on the Asia Pacific region. What they want to do is they want to see how our product performs in the Australian market and the wider Asian market before potentially considering going global. It's very important to mention also that when you're selling these types of products into applications like concrete, it's very, very hard to do it directly yourself because you're talking about individual batching plants, which there could be hundreds of those. There are, in fact, there's hundreds of those in Australia alone. So you need to have supply from stores nearby to all of those batching plants, and it might only be small amounts every week or even on a daily basis. So by using someone like IMCD, who's got all those channels to market in place, they've got the right salespeople, they've got the logistics in place, then that is exactly the right model we need to sell that sort of additive into the market. So we're happy that they are the right partner for us there, and we just need to get this binding offtake negotiated to both parties' requirements, and that's in progress.
Thanks, James. A common question that I receive is, why do we not see directors and management buying shares on market if you believe the company price is a good investment opportunity?
Yes, I do get that question, and I do get some messages, some quite negative messages about that, saying what's going on, but I can clarify that by saying that as directors of Andromeda, we're actually not allowed to buy on markets except for very small windows of opportunity. And the next window of opportunity is probably going to be after the AGM, once we get the annual report out. So we just cannot do that. Now, we know a lot of things that are going on in the background that are not public, so that restricts us from doing that. Otherwise, I can tell you for a fact there would be some buying activities going on.
All right, now that concludes our Q&A session. There are a number of questions that have come through, and we've tried to cover broadly all those questions through some of the selected ones here today, and I think many of them have been answered during your general discussion there, James. Please do send those questions through to us, and we'll have someone respond to you. That includes our webinar today, and I'd like to thank you, James, and everybody else who joined us here today to understand what's going on here with Andromeda, and we look forward to some encouraging, exciting news in the near term.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'd like to add to that, hopefully that's reassured you that we are in this for the long term. We are trying to build a very long-term successful business here, and we're well on track to doing that. So thank you for your time and listening to me.
Thank you very much, James. Thanks all.